What if the person everyone dismissed had the ultimate power? Olivia Caldwell, disguised as a janitor, quietly observes the downfall of a failing tech company. The executives make harsh decisions, unaware that the woman they ignore is actually the new owner. As Olivia uncovers the toxic culture and ruthless layoffs, she prepares for the moment when she'll reveal her true identity and change everything. But what happens when the truth comes out? How will the company and its arrogant leaders react when they realize who's really in control? What would you do in Olivia's position? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more inspiring stories of justice and redemption. The dull hum of fluorescent lights and the sharp click of heels on the tile floor echoed through the boardroom as Olivia Caldwell pushed her mop and bucket down the hallway. She moved slowly, deliberately, her posture relaxed, but her mind was sharp, focused on the conversations swirling around her. The executives seated at the sleek glass table ahead of her barely noticed her presence as they argued over quarterly projections, her role that of a ghost among the powerful. But Olivia Caldwell wasn't just any janitor. She had watched from the shadows for weeks, listening to the self-assured voices of those who believed themselves untouchable. They had no idea that the quiet woman cleaning their conference room was the majority owner of the very corporation they worked for, Didn Tech, a company teetering on the brink of financial ruin. Olivia had bought the failing corporation with a plan to rebuild it from the inside out, but first she needed to understand the rot. The name Olivia Caldwell held weight in the business world, though few had ever met her face to face. She had built her empire from the ground up, starting with nothing more than grit and determination. Raised by a single mother in a neighborhood where opportunity was a rare commodity, Olivia had learned early on how to navigate spaces where she was underestimated, ignored, or outright dismissed. Her success wasn't handed to her. She had fought tooth and nail for every inch. As Olivia moved through the room, her eyes scanned the faces of the executives seated at the table. Most of them were men in their late 40s or 50s, dressed in expensive suits with expressions of cold calculation. They spoke of profits and losses, layoffs and cuts, with detached cruelty that made her stomach churn. They talked about human lives as if they were mere numbers on a balance sheet. Her grip tightened on the mop handle, but she kept her face expressionless. She had endured worse in her life: casual racism, sexism, the dismissal of her intelligence and capabilities because of her gender and the color of her skin. None of that had stopped her. If anything, it had fueled her rise to the top. The building itself was an architectural marvel, a shining testament to Didn Tech's former glory. The sprawling glass windows reflected the bustling city below, and the marble floors gleamed under the harsh office lighting. But beneath the surface of its pristine exterior, the company was decaying. Poor leadership, bloated executive salaries, and a complete disregard for the employees who kept the company running had led to its slow, inevitable collapse. It was this decay that had attracted Olivia. She had always been drawn to challenges, to taking something broken and making it whole again. But before she could fix Didn Tech, she had to see the problem for herself. So she had made the decision to temporarily step into the shoes of the company's lowest paid workers, the janitors, the staff who went unseen and unheard. Over the past few weeks, Olivia had witnessed the truth about Didn Tech's culture. The people in charge, men like Derek Marsh, the CFO, and Jessica Reeves, the head of HR, were more concerned with protecting their own positions than with saving the company. The arrogance was palpable. Derek, with his perfectly tailored suits and cold blue eyes, saw layoffs as a solution to every financial problem. Jessica, a woman who should have been an ally to the employees, was just as ruthless, turning a blind eye to the mistreatment happening under her watch. And then there was Jack Stevenson, the ambitious marketing manager. Jack, in his mid-30s, had climbed the corporate ladder, not through talent, but through backroom deals and ruthless office politics. He was a man who believed in cutting corners, in taking credit for others' work, and in stepping on anyone who got in his way. He had already made several comments about Olivia during her shifts, mocking the janitors and treating them like they were less than human. But Olivia was used to being underestimated. Each day, Olivia arrived at the building before dawn, dressed in the plain, unremarkable uniform of the janitorial staff. She kept her head down and her movements precise, moving through the office with the practiced ease of someone who had long mastered the art of blending in. The employees barely noticed her as she swept the floors and wiped down tables. To them, she was just a nameless, faceless worker. But Olivia wasn't just cleaning, she was listening. Each conversation, every careless remark, was another piece of the puzzle she was building. Derek's voice was often the loudest, barking orders about cutting costs and discussing the necessity of reducing the workforce. He talked about layoffs with the kind of detachment that suggested he had never once considered the lives behind the numbers. "They're barely necessary," he said one morning, his voice dripping with disdain as he discussed the administrative staff. "We could cut half of them and still meet deadlines." Olivia felt a familiar surge of anger at his words, but she kept her face neutral. She had to maintain her cover for just a little longer. The time would come when she would reveal herself, and when she did, it would be on her terms. Meanwhile, Jessica, the head of HR, wasn't much better. She spoke in the same calculated tones as Derek, always looking for ways to protect upper management at the expense of the workers. Whenever an employee came to her with a complaint about the toxic work environment, she dismissed them with a practiced smile, assuring them that these things take time or that it's just the way business works. Jack Stevenson, however, was the worst offender. His comments were always dripping with sarcasm and condescension, especially toward the janitors. He took every opportunity to make Olivia's life more difficult, asking her to clean up imaginary messes, making snide remarks about how the janitorial staff was overpaid for doing nothing. "Honestly," he said to one of his colleagues during a break room conversation, "I don't know why we keep so many of them around. Half the time I don't even see them doing anything." The casual dehumanization infuriated Olivia, but she knew that reacting would only give them what they wanted. She had endured far worse in her life and came out stronger. This was just another test of her patience and resolve. As the weeks passed, Olivia's observations painted a clearer picture of Dunham Tech's problems. It wasn't just the financial issues or the declining market share that had led the company to the brink of collapse. It was the culture. The executives had created an environment where employees were treated as expendable, where profits were valued more than people. The breaking point came one afternoon during a board meeting that Olivia had been assigned to clean. As she quietly moved through the room, Derek and Jessica were deep in discussion about the upcoming layoffs. Jack sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, barely paying attention. "We need to cut costs immediately," Derek said, his voice sharp. "If we don't, the board's going to come after us. Start with the administrative staff, then look at janitorial services. We're overstaffed there, too." Olivia's heart tightened. She knew this was coming, but hearing it spoken so casually, as if people's livelihoods meant nothing, ignited a fire inside her. These weren't just numbers. They were people with families, bills, and dreams. And yet Derek, Jessica, and Jack acted as if cutting jobs was nothing more than adjusting a column on a spreadsheet. Jessica nodded in agreement. "We can get rid of at least 20% without anyone noticing," she said, tapping her pen against the table. "I'll handle the paperwork." Jack glanced up at his phone, smirking. "Honestly, you could probably cut 50%. No one would miss them." The callousness of the conversation hit Olivia like a punch to the gut. She had spent her entire career fighting against people like this, those who believed they were entitled to success while disregarding the people who actually kept their businesses running. Olivia had been patient for weeks, but she could feel her control slipping. She couldn't stand by and let these people destroy everything she had worked for. She had bought Didn Tech to save it, not to watch it be gutted by greed. Her mind raced as she continued cleaning, her movements automatic as she plotted her next move. She couldn't reveal herself yet. It wasn't the right time. But soon, very soon, she would make them all see the truth. For now, she would endure the humiliation, the dismissive comments, and the casual racism. She had been through worse before, and she knew that real change didn't happen overnight. But when the time came, she would be ready. In the closing scenes of Act 1, Olivia walks the nearly empty halls of the office building late at night, her janitor's uniform still clinging to her frame. She pauses outside the CEO's office, the brass nameplate bearing the name of Richard Dunham, the previous owner. In a few short weeks, her own name would replace him. She takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of what is to come. The decisions made by Derek, Jessica, and Jack are going to cost the company far more than they realize, and soon they will be forced to confront the consequences of their arrogance. But for now, she remains in the shadows, gathering her strength for the storm she is about to unleash. Olivia arrived early, just as she had for weeks. The sun hadn't yet risen, casting the city in a cool, pre-dawn stillness. Her reflection moved in the glass as she passed through the front doors of Didn Tech, the janitor's uniform a symbol of her invisibility. It was the day of the big board meeting. Derek Marsh and the others had been preparing for it all week. As she entered the boardroom to begin her cleaning, the tension in the air was palpable. Olivia could feel it, the desperation, the fear. Didn Tech had been hemorrhaging money for months, and today, the executives were preparing to announce the first wave of layoffs. The cuts would hit hard and deep, starting with the most vulnerable employees, the administrative staff, janitors, and lower-level workers. Olivia watched as Derek, Jessica, and Andrew Malloy, the head of operations, gathered around the table, whispering about the impending decisions. Derek's voice was the most dominant, a sharp edge to his words that made Olivia's skin crawl. "We have no choice but to cut," Derek said, pointing to a spreadsheet on his tablet. "We can't afford to keep paying for benefits packages. If we cut 20% of the lower-level staff, we can keep the board satisfied for another quarter." Andrew nodded, his eyes scanning the numbers. "It's the only way to stay afloat." They were speaking with a kind of grim determination, but Olivia knew better. This wasn't about saving the company. It was about saving themselves, protecting their bonuses, their salaries, their positions of power. The people who made the company run were nothing more than numbers for them. Olivia moved slowly, her hands methodically wiping down the table as she listened. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her face remained impassive. She couldn't afford to give herself away now. "We could start with janitorial," Derek continued, his voice oozing arrogance. "They're barely necessary. Outsource it. Cut the staff by half and no one will even notice." Jessica glanced at Olivia briefly before turning back to the others, her face expressionless. "I'll draft the paperwork," she said. Jack Stevenson, who had just walked into the room, smirked as he caught the tail end of the conversation. "Honestly, I don't even know why we need them in-house. Contract it out, save some money. It's not like it's rocket science." Olivia's grip on the cleaning cloth tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. The words stung, but she had to endure it. She had to stay patient. They had no idea who she really was, and when the time came, they would regret every careless, arrogant word they had spoken. Later that day, Olivia found herself in the break room, sitting quietly at one of the small round tables. Around her, the employees gossiped, their voices buzzing with anxious energy. The rumors of layoffs had begun to spread, and everyone was on edge, trying to figure out if they would be the next to go. From across the room, Olivia overheard a conversation between Jessica and Haley, a mid-level administrative assistant. Haley, who had been at Didn Tech for over a decade, looked visibly distressed as she asked Jessica about the rumors. "Is it true?" Haley asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are there going to be layoffs?" Jessica shrugged, her tone casual. "It's business, Haley. Sometimes tough decisions have to be made. You know how it goes." Haley's face fell, but Jessica turned away, already done with the conversation. Olivia felt a pang of sympathy for Haley and the others who were about to lose their jobs. They were good people, hardworking, loyal, and utterly expendable in the eyes of the executives. As Olivia stood up to leave, she noticed Chris Dalton sitting at another table, typing furiously on his laptop. Chris had been one of the few people in the office who treated the janitorial staff with any semblance of respect. He wasn't overly friendly or chatty, but he acknowledged them, something that most of the other executives never bothered to do. Chris caught her eye as she passed, giving her a small, tired smile. Olivia nodded in return, feeling a flicker of hope. Not everyone in the company was like Derek and Jessica. There were still good people here, people who cared. But was it enough? Olivia wondered. Could she really turn this company around when the leadership was so thoroughly rotten? The weight of the question sat heavily on her chest, filling her with doubt. The following day, Olivia was pushing her cleaning cart through the office when she noticed Chris standing by the window, looking out at the city with a troubled expression. On impulse, she slowed down, taking a moment to observe him. After a few seconds of silence, Chris turned to her and offered a half-hearted smile. "Long day," he said, more to himself than to her. Olivia hesitated for a moment before responding. "Yeah, seems like there's a lot on your mind." Chris blinked, clearly not expecting a response from her. Most people didn't talk to the janitors unless it was to complain about a spill or ask for the trash to be taken out. But something in Olivia's voice seemed to catch his attention, and he turned to face her fully. "You could say that," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "There's a lot happening right now, a lot of decisions being made that I don't necessarily agree with." Olivia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Like what?" Chris glanced around the room, making sure no one else was listening. "The layoffs," he said in a low voice. "They're cutting jobs left and right, but they're not addressing the real issues. This company used to be a leader in the tech industry, but we haven't innovated in years. We're stuck in the past, and instead of fixing that, they're just cutting people to make the numbers look better." Olivia felt a surge of respect for Chris. He was one of the few people who seemed to understand what was really going wrong at Didn Tech. He wasn't just trying to save his own skin. He genuinely cared about the future of the company. "I wish I could do something," Chris continued, his voice laced with frustration. "But I'm just a mid-level manager. No one's going to listen to me." Olivia smiled faintly, a plan beginning to form in her mind. "You never know," she said quietly. "Sometimes it's the people no one expects who end up making the biggest impact." Chris chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Maybe, but for now, all I can do is keep my head down and hope I don't end up on the chopping block." Olivia didn't respond, but as she walked away, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Chris was right. The company was stuck in the past, and the current leadership wasn't capable of steering it toward the future, but she was. And with people like Chris on her side, she knew that real change was possible. A week later, the board meeting arrived. It was the moment Olivia had been dreading, the day when the layoffs would be officially announced. She entered the boardroom early to clean, her heart pounding as she thought about what was about to happen. She had known this moment was coming, but now that it was here, the weight of it felt almost unbearable. As she wiped down the table, Derek, Jessica, and Andrew filed into the room, followed by Jack and the rest of the executives. Their voices were low, serious, as they prepared for the difficult task ahead. Olivia could see the tension in their faces, the anxiety in their movements. They knew that this meeting was going to be brutal. Derek took his seat at the head of the table, his eyes cold and calculating. "Let's get this over with," he said, his voice sharp. "We have to make some tough decisions today, but it's for the good of the company. We can't keep all these unnecessary people on the payroll." Jessica nodded, her face emotionless, as she reviewed the list of names. "We're starting with administrative staff and janitors. After that, we'll look at reducing the IT department." Jack leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Honestly, I'm surprised we haven't cut them sooner. They're not doing anything that couldn't be outsourced." Olivia's chest tightened as she listened to their casual cruelty. These people were playing with lives, cutting jobs without a second thought, without considering the impact it would have on the employees and their families. She had known that Derek and the others were ruthless, but seeing it unfold in real time was worse than she had imagined. Her hands trembled as she cleaned, but she forced herself to stay calm. She couldn't afford to react. Not yet. She had to bide her time, wait for the right moment. But the anger inside her was growing, threatening to overwhelm her. As the meeting went on, Olivia listened in silence as the executives discussed the layoffs, throwing around numbers and percentages as if they were talking about inventory, not people. Every word was another nail in the coffin of the company's soul. Finally, Derek stood up, addressing the room with an air of finality. "This is the only way to save Dunham Tech," he said, his voice firm. "We have to cut the dead weight if we're going to survive." Olivia clenched her fists, her mind racing. She couldn't let this happen. She had spent weeks watching these people destroy everything Dunham Tech had once stood for, and now they were about to deliver the final blow. But what could she do? She was just a janitor to them, someone who didn't matter, someone who had no power. How could she stop them? As the meeting came to an end, Olivia felt a wave of despair wash over her. She had thought she could fix this company, that she could save it from itself. But now it felt like everything was slipping through her fingers. She had never felt so powerless in her life. Olivia left the boardroom in a daze, her mind clouded with doubt and anger. She had spent weeks enduring humiliation, listening to the executives tear down everything she had built. She had thought she could stay patient, that she could wait for the right moment to reveal herself. But now she wasn't sure. Maybe it was too late. Maybe Dunham Tech was already too far gone. As she walked through the empty halls of the building that night, the weight of her decision pressed down on her. Should she reveal herself now? Should she take control and try to stop layoffs before it is too late? Or should she wait, gather more information, and make her move later? She paused outside the CEO's office, her hand resting on the door. The brass nameplate still bore Richard Dunham's name, but soon it would carry hers. Olivia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The storm was coming, and when it hit, everything would change. For now, she had to endure. But soon, very soon, the balance of power would shift. And when it did, the people who had dismissed her, the people who had treated her invisible, would finally see her for who she truly was. The boardroom was unusually quiet the next morning. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished table. Olivia stood in the corner, mop in hand, blending into the background as usual. The tension in the room was thick, a palpable sense of impending doom as the executives shuffled in one by one. This was the moment. The layoffs would be finalized today, and hundreds of employees would lose their jobs, all because of the selfish, short-sighted decisions made by a handful of people at the top. Olivia had spent weeks watching them tear the company apart, and today they were about to finish the job, but not if she could help it. Derek Marsh sat at the head of the table, his sharp features even more severe than usual. He didn't look at Olivia as he passed by her, not even a glance. None of them did. To them, she was still invisible, a ghost in the room, cleaning up their messes without a word. She watched as they took their seats, their voices low, discussing the day's grim agenda. Andrew Malloy, the head of operations, flipped through a stack of papers, his brow furrowed as he reviewed the final list of employees to be cut. Jessica Reeves tapped her pen against the table, her face a mask of indifference. Jack Stevenson leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, looking bored. Olivia's pulse quickened. She could feel the weight of what she was about to do settling in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral, her movements steady. She couldn't afford to show any hesitation now. Derek cleared his throat, calling the meeting to order. "We all know why we're here," he began, his tone clipped. "The layoffs need to be finalized today. We've delayed this long enough. Let's get it over with." Olivia stood silently in the corner, wiping down a table, her heart pounding. She had waited for weeks, gathering information, watching these people make one disastrous decision after another. She had wanted to understand the full scope of the problem before taking action, and now she knew everything she needed to know. It was time. As Derek and the others began discussing the logistics of the layoffs, Olivia set her mop aside and walked toward the head of the table, her footsteps soft but deliberate. No one noticed her at first. They were too absorbed in their conversation, but when she reached Derek's side, she tapped him lightly on the shoulder. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady but firm. Derek turned to her, frowning. His brows furrowed in confusion as he looked at her, clearly not recognizing the woman who had been cleaning his office for weeks. "What is it?" he asked, his tone irritated. "We're in the middle of something." Olivia met his gaze without flinching. "I think it's time I spoke." For a moment the room fell silent, the other executives turning to look at her, their expressions ranging from confusion to mild annoyance. Jack Stevenson was the first to react, his voice dripping with condescension. "What are you doing?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "This is a private meeting. You have no business here." Olivia didn't respond to Jack's tone. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope, the one containing the documentation of her ownership of the company. She had been waiting for this moment, waiting to see how far they would go before she revealed the truth. She handed the envelope to Derek, her voice calm and unwavering. "I think you'll find that I have every right to be here." Derek's eyes widened as he took the envelope from her, his fingers trembling slightly as he tore it open. He scanned the document inside, his face going pale as he read the words confirming Olivia as the majority owner of Dunham Tech. The room erupted into chaos. Executives spoke over one another, trying to make sense of what was happening. Jessica's face drained of color, her eyes wide with shock. Andrew Malloy blinked rapidly, looking from the document to Olivia and back again. But it was Jack who reacted the loudest, standing up so quickly that his chair clattered to the floor. "You can't do this," Jack shouted, his face flushed with anger. "You're just a janitor." Olivia turned to him slowly, her gaze cold and unyielding. "I'm not just anything," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "I'm the woman who now controls your job, your salary, and the future of this company, and I'll be making sure that people like you, people who think they can treat others like they don't matter, are held accountable." The room fell silent again, the weight of her words settling over them like a heavy fog. Olivia looked around at the faces of the executives who had dismissed her for weeks. The same people who had mocked her, ignored her, and treated her invisible. Now they were at her mercy. The silence was deafening. Olivia stood at the head of the table, her eyes scanning the room, meeting each executive's gaze with calm authority. She could see disbelief in their faces, the shock of realizing that the woman they had treated with disdain was the true power behind the company. Derek Marsh was the first to speak, his voice trembling slightly as he tried to regain control of the situation. This can't be right," he stammered, glancing down at the document again as if hoping the words would somehow change. "You can't just come in here and—" "Oh, it's very right," Olivia interrupted, her voice firm. "I've owned this company for weeks now, and I've been watching, listening, and learning. I've seen how you've run this place into the ground with your arrogance, your greed, and your complete disregard for the people who actually make this company run." Jack Stevenson, still red-faced with anger, slammed his hands down on the table. "You think you can just waltz in here and fire us? We've been running this company for years. You don't know what it takes to keep a business like this afloat." Olivia turned her gaze to Jack, her expression hardening. "Actually, I know exactly what it takes," she said, her voice sharp. "I built my own company from nothing. I've worked in rooms full of people who looked down on me, who saw me as nothing more than my skin color or my gender. But I built an empire anyway. What have you done? Protected your own paycheck while the company crumbled around you?" Jack opened his mouth to argue, but Olivia didn't give him the chance. "You're fired," she said coldly, her voice cutting through the tension in the room like a blade. "Effective immediately." The room erupted in gasps as Jack's face went pale, his bravado crumbling. "You can't do this," he sputtered, his voice rising in panic. "I've been here for—" "I don't care how long you've been here," Olivia interrupted, her tone icy. "You've spent weeks mocking the people who actually keep this company running. You think you're untouchable, but you're not. No one is." Before Jack could respond, 2 security guards appeared at the door, summoned by Olivia's signal. "Escort Mr. Stevenson out of the building," she instructed, her voice calm but firm. The guards moved toward Jack, who looked around the room for support, but no one came to his defense. The other executives were stunned, too afraid of what would happen next. Jack muttered under his breath as the guards led him out, his protests weak, his confidence shattered. As the door closed behind him, the room remained silent, the tension hanging thick in the air. Olivia turned her attention back to the rest of the executives, her expression unreadable. "Anyone else have something to say?" she asked, her voice low but dangerous. Derek Marsh swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for a way out. "Miss Caldwell," he began, his voice shaky, "if we could just discuss this—" "There's nothing to discuss," Olivia cut him off. "You and the others have had your chance to save this company, and all you've done is make it worse. You've made decisions that benefit yourselves while sacrificing the people who actually matter. That ends today." Jessica Reeves, who had remained silent until now, cleared her throat nervously. "Miss Caldwell, You have a choice," Olivia said, turning her gaze to Jessica. "You can either stay and commit to helping me rebuild this company the right way, or you can leave with your severance package. But know this, if you stay, things are going to change. Drastically." Jessica hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she considered her options. She glanced at Derek, whose face had gone ashen, then back at Olivia. I'll stay," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll do whatever it takes." Olivia nodded, her expression softening slightly. "Good. But know this, I'm not here to play games. If I see even a hint of the toxic behavior that's been allowed to fester in this company, you'll be out the door just as fast as Jack was." Jessica nodded quickly, her face pale. "Understood." With that, Olivia turned her attention back to the rest of the room. For those of you who remain, things are going to be different around here. We're no longer going to operate under a system where the executives protect their own interests while the employees suffer. This company is going to be rebuilt from the ground up, and it starts today. Over the next few weeks, the changes came swiftly. Olivia wasted no time dismantling the toxic structures that had been in place for far too long. She called an all-hands meeting, addressing the entire company for the first time as their new leader. The employees, many of whom had been on the brink of losing their jobs, were stunned to learn that Olivia had taken control. Rumors had been swirling since the day Jack was escorted out of the building, but now the truth is out in the open. Olivia Caldwell, the woman they had all overlooked, was the new owner of Didn Tech. In her speech, Olivia didn't mince words. She laid out her vision for the future, a company where every employee, from janitors to executives, was valued and respected. A company that would no longer sacrifice its workforce in the name of short-term profits, would instead invest in its people and its future. The reactions were mixed at first. Some employees were skeptical, unsure if real change was possible after years of mismanagement. Others were cautiously optimistic, hopeful that Olivia's leadership would finally bring the company back to life. But one thing was clear: Olivia wasn't here to play by the old rules. She was here to tear them down and build something better. One afternoon, after a particularly long day of meetings and strategy sessions, Olivia found herself alone in the break room, sipping a cup of coffee. The room was quiet, the usual chatter absent, as most of the employees had already gone home for the day. As she sat there, staring out the window at the setting sun, she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Chris Dalton standing in the doorway, his expression uncertain. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice hesitant. Olivia smiled and gestured for him to sit. "Not at all." Chris sat down across from her, his eyes scanning her face as if trying to gauge her mood. "It's been a crazy few weeks," he said finally, his voice low. Olivia chuckled softly. "You can say that again." Chris leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything you've done. I wasn't sure if things would ever change around here, but you've given us all hope." Olivia smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I didn't do it alone," she said quietly. "There are people like you who care about this company, about the people who work here. That's what gives me hope." Chris looked down at his hands, a faint blush rising to his cheeks. "I've always believed that things could be better," he said softly. I didn't think I could make a difference." "You've already made a difference," Olivia said, her voice gentle. "And now, we have a chance to rebuild this company together." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, the weight of the past few weeks slowly lifting from their shoulders. It wasn't over yet. There was still so much work to be done. But for the first time in a long time, Olivia felt a sense of peace. The following weeks at Didn Tech were a whirlwind of change. Olivia had torn down the toxic leadership that had been running the company into the ground, but that was only the beginning. Now came the hard part, rebuilding from the foundation up. Every morning, she arrived before dawn, just as she had done during her time undercover as a janitor. But this time, she wasn't invisible. The employees had quickly learned that their new CEO was not just a figurehead who sat in a cushy office all day. Olivia was deeply involved in the day-to-day operations, learning, observing, and making decisions that would affect everyone from the janitors to the executives. Her office, a simple minimalist space with large windows overlooking the city, became a hub of activity. Meetings were frequent, and decisions were swift. Olivia had no patience for inefficiency or the drawn-out corporate processes that had bogged down Didn Tech for so long. Chris Dalton, now promoted to Director of Operations, worked closely with Olivia to implement the new strategies. He had proven to be a steady, thoughtful leader, and Olivia was grateful to have him by her side. Together, they began to reshape the company, focusing on three key areas: employee well-being, innovation, and long-term sustainability. The first order of business was restructuring the workforce, but not through layoffs. Instead, Olivia focused on reallocating resources, finding areas where the company had been overspending on unnecessary perks for the executives while underfunding the departments that actually drove innovation. The janitorial staff, who had once been viewed as expendable, were given better wages and benefits. Administrative assistants, who had been overworked and underappreciated, were given a voice in the decision-making process. In a meeting with department heads, Olivia laid out her vision. "We're not just going to survive, we're going to thrive," she said, her voice strong and confident. "But that means we have to stop thinking about quick fixes and start thinking about the future. We need to invest in our people, innovate in ways that no one else is doing, and rebuild this company's reputation from the inside out." The room was quiet as she spoke, the department heads listening carefully. Some of them, like Chris, were already on board with her vision. Others were more skeptical, still clinging to the old ways of doing things. But Olivia was patient. She knew that real change took time, and she was willing to fight for it. The changes at Didn Tech didn't happen overnight, but they were undeniable. As the weeks went on, the atmosphere in the office began to shift. The employees who had once lived in constant fear of layoffs and management's cold disregard now started to feel a sense of stability. Olivia made it a point to walk the halls of the building, speaking directly with the employees, from the engineers in the tech department to the janitors cleaning the floors. She wanted to know their stories, their struggles, and their ideas for making the company better. And unlike the previous leadership, Olivia actually listened. One afternoon, Olivia stopped by the break room, where a group of employees were gathered around the coffee machine. They fell silent when she entered, clearly surprised to see her there. But Olivia smiled, walking over to pour herself a cup of coffee. "Don't stop on my account," she said warmly. "I want to hear what you all have to say." The employees exchanged glances, uncertain. Finally, one of them, a young woman named Maria, who worked in customer support, spoke up. "We were just talking about the new policies," she said nervously. "The health benefits package, the flexible hours, it's really different." Olivia nodded. "I know it's a lot of change all at once," she said, her voice calm. "But I promise you it's change for the better. You all are the reason this company exists, and you deserve to be treated with respect." Maria blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct response. "We've never had someone in management actually care about us," she admitted quietly. "It's strange." Olivia smiled again, though there was a twinge of sadness in her eyes. "I know, but that's going to change." As she left the break room, Olivia felt a sense of satisfaction. The employees were starting to see that her leadership was different, that she wasn't just paying lip service to the idea of valuing them, she was putting those words into action. Still, it wasn't easy. The old guard at Didn Tech, those who had been loyal to Derek and Jack's style of management, were resistant to the changes. They grumbled in private meetings, questioning Olivia's decisions and wondering if her vision was too idealistic. But Olivia wasn't deterred. She knew that leadership wasn't about pleasing everyone. It was about doing what was right, even when it wasn't popular. As Olivia worked tirelessly to transform Didn Tech, she knew that some difficult decisions still had to be made. While most of the employees had embraced the changes, a few held on to the toxic behaviors that had poisoned the company's culture for so long. Jessica Reeves, the HR head who had chosen to stay on, was one of them. Though she had agreed to work under Olivia's new vision, it was clear that she was struggling to adapt. Olivia had given her the benefit of the doubt, hoping that Jessica could change. But week after week, Olivia noticed the same dismissive attitude creeping into Jessica's work, the same reluctance to engage with employees in a meaningful way. It came to a head one afternoon when Olivia received a report from an employee who had gone to Jessica with a workplace harassment issue only to be brushed off. Olivia sat at her desk, the report in her hands, feeling a mixture of frustration and disappointment. She had given Jessica a chance to redeem herself, but it was clear that she wasn't willing to change. That evening, Olivia called Jessica into her office. Jessica walked in, her posture stiff, clearly aware that this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. "Jessica," Olivia began, her tone firm but not unkind, "we need to talk." Jessica shifted uncomfortably in her seat, avoiding Olivia's gaze. "Is this about the report?" Olivia nodded, placing the report on the desk between them. "You've had several opportunities to show me that you're committed to the new direction we're taking this company, but this is unacceptable." Jessica finally looked up, her face pale. "I thought I was doing what needed to be done," she said quietly. "You have to understand, this company has always been tough. It's just the way things are." Olivia's expression hardened. "It's the way things were, Jessica, but not anymore. We're building a new culture here, one where employees are valued, respected, and treated fairly. If you can't be part of that, then I'm afraid we can't continue working together." Jessica's eyes widened, and for a moment, Olivia thought she might argue. But then, Jessica's shoulders slumped and she let out a resigned sigh. "I understand," she said softly. "I'll hand in my resignation." Olivia nodded. "Thank you for your service to this company. I wish you the best in your next steps." As Jessica left the office, Olivia felt a heavy weight lift from her chest. She had always known that leading Dunham Tech through this transformation wouldn't be easy, and letting people go was never a decision she took lightly. But sometimes it was necessary. With Jessica gone, Olivia focused on filling the HR role with someone who shared her values, someone who believed in creating a positive, inclusive work environment. She found that person in Emily Park, a former HR executive from a competitor who had a reputation for being compassionate, fair, and innovative. Emily's arrival marked a turning point for the company. Under her leadership, the HR department became a true advocate for the employees, working closely with Olivia and Chris to ensure that every voice was heard and every concern was addressed. Slowly but surely, the pieces were falling into place. 6 months after Olivia's takeover, Dunham Tech was unrecognizable. The once toxic culture had been replaced with one of collaboration, innovation, and respect. The company's financials had begun to stabilize thanks to Olivia's strategic investments in research and development. But more than that, the employees were thriving. Productivity had increased, and for the first time in years, Dunham Tech was making headlines for its positive workplace culture rather than its internal scandals. Olivia sat in her office one afternoon reviewing the latest quarterly report. The numbers were promising. Sales were up, customer satisfaction had improved, and the company's stock price was climbing steadily. It was proof that her vision was working. But Olivia wasn't ready to rest on her laurels just yet. She knew that this was only the beginning. There were still challenges ahead, still improvements to be made. But for the first time in a long time, she felt confident in the future. Chris knocked on her door, poking his head in with a grin. "Got a minute?" Olivia smiled and gestured for him to come in. "Of course." Chris sat down across from her, placing a folder on the desk. "I just wanted to show you the latest feedback from the employees. It's pretty amazing." Olivia opened the folder and scanned the pages. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Employees praised the new leadership. the improved benefits, and the overall atmosphere of the company. One comment in particular stood out. "I've never felt so valued in a workplace before. Thank you for giving us a chance to succeed." Olivia's heart swelled with pride as she read the words. "This is incredible," she said softly. "We're really making a difference." Chris nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I think we are. But it's all because of you, Olivia. You're the one who made this happen." Olivia shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "I didn't do it alone. This is all of us working together." Chris smiled back, his eyes warm. "You're too modest." As they sat in comfortable silence, Olivia allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She had come a long way, from a janitor, quietly observing from the shadows, to the CEO of a thriving, innovative company. It hadn't been easy, and there were still battles to be fought, but she had proven to herself and to everyone else that she had the strength to lead. She had taken a broken company and rebuilt it, not just from the top down, but from the inside out. And she had done it while staying true to her values. As the sun began to set outside her office window, casting a warm glow over the city skyline, Olivia knew that this was only the beginning. Dunham Tech had a bright future ahead, and she was ready to lead it into the next chapter. 6 months had passed since Olivia took control of Dunham Tech, and the company was thriving. What had once been a place of fear, arrogance, and division was now buzzing with a renewed energy. Innovation was at the heart of everything, and Olivia had pushed the company forward with a combination of strong leadership and a deep understanding of what truly made a business succeed: its people. But the journey wasn't over. Olivia knew that transforming the company's internal culture was only one part of the equation. The outside world, the investors, the board members, and the market still viewed Dunham Tech with skepticism. Some believed the company's success was temporary, that Olivia's radical changes were too idealistic to last in the cutthroat world of tech. That skepticism hung over the company as they prepared for their biggest test yet, the annual shareholders' meeting. It was a make-or-break moment, and Olivia knew it. The shareholders had been critical of her from the beginning, questioning her decisions, her leadership style, and her bold strategies. This meeting would be their chance to voice those concerns. But it was also Olivia's chance to prove them wrong. The day of the meeting arrived, and the air in the conference hall buzzed with anticipation. The room was filled with board members, shareholders, and executives, all waiting to hear from the woman who had taken Dunham Tech from the brink of collapse and turned it into one of the most talked-about companies in the industry. Olivia stood at the back of the room, watching as the last few people filed in, her heart pounding in her chest. She had faced countless challenges in her life: poverty, discrimination, doubt. But this felt different. This was the culmination of everything she had worked for, everything she had fought to achieve. As she made her way to the stage, she could feel the weight of their eyes on her, some filled with curiosity, others with skepticism. But Olivia wasn't here to win their approval. She was here to show them the truth. She stepped up to the podium, took a deep breath, and began. "Thank you all for being here today," she started, her voice steady and strong. 6 months ago, Dunham Tech was on the brink of collapse. Morale was low, our stock prices were falling, and we had lost our way. But today, I stand before you with a different story, a story of resilience, of innovation, and of transformation. A ripple of interest passed through the crowd, and Olivia pressed on, her confidence building with each word. "When I took over this company, I made a promise to myself and to all of you that we would not only survive but thrive, and we've done that. But we didn't do it by cutting corners, slashing jobs, or making decisions that hurt our people. We did it by investing in our employees, fostering creativity, and building a culture of respect and collaboration." She glanced at the faces in the crowd, seeing both approval and doubt. It didn't matter. She had the facts to back up her words. I'm proud to report that in the last quarter, Didn Tech saw a 15% increase in revenue and a 25% rise in stock value. Customer satisfaction is at an all-time high, and our new product line, developed entirely by our talented team, has generated more buzz than anything we've done in the last 5 years. A murmur of surprise swept through the room. The shareholders had been aware of the company's recent successes, but hearing the numbers laid out so clearly had an undeniable impact. Olivia could see the shift in their expressions, curiosity turning to respect. But more than that, Olivia continued, her voice softening, we've built a company that people are proud to work for. We've created an environment where every employee, from the janitors to the engineers, feels valued and heard, and that's what's truly driving our success. She let her words hang in the air for a moment, allowing the weight of them to sink in. There are those who said this couldn't be done, that treating people with respect, paying fair wages, and fostering a positive work culture was a luxury we couldn't afford. But I'm here to tell you that it's not a luxury. It's the foundation of our success. And it's why Didn Tech is going to continue to grow, to innovate, and to lead the industry for years to come. The room was silent, the tension almost palpable as Olivia stepped back from the podium. For a moment she wasn't sure how they would react, but then slowly, one by one, the shareholders began to clap. The applause grew louder, swelling through the room until it became a standing ovation. Olivia stood tall, her heart swelling with pride. She had done it. She had taken everything they had thrown at her, all the doubt, the criticism, the condescension, and she had proven them wrong. But more than that, she had proven something to herself. The weeks following the shareholders' meeting were a whirlwind of activity. Didn Tech had officially entered a new era, and the industry was taking notice. Media outlets were buzzing with stories of the company's transformation, praising Olivia's bold leadership and innovative strategies. Investors who had once been skeptical were now clamoring to buy shares, and the company's stock price soared. But for Olivia, the real victory was inside the company itself. One afternoon, as she walked through the halls of Didn Tech, Olivia was struck by how different the office felt. There was a buzz of excitement in the air, a sense of possibility that hadn't existed before. Employees greeted her with smiles, no longer fearful of their jobs or resentful of management. They felt empowered, inspired, and part of something bigger than themselves. Olivia paused by the break room where a group of janitors were laughing and talking together. One of them, a young woman named Allison, caught sight of Olivia and smiled warmly. "Miss Caldwell," Allison said, stepping forward, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything." Olivia's heart swelled. "You don't have to thank me, Allison. You earned it." Allison's smile widened, and she nodded before returning to her group. As Olivia continued down the hallway, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. Just months ago, she had been invisible to these people, a janitor who no one noticed or respected. But now, she was leading them, and not just as their CEO, but as someone who had walked in their shoes. As she approached her office, Olivia was met by Chris Dalton, who was holding a stack of reports. He grinned as he handed them to her. "Another solid quarter," he said. "We're exceeding every projection." Olivia took the reports and smiled. "I never doubted it for a second." Chris chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. "You really turned this place around, Olivia. It's incredible." She glanced at him, her smile softening. "We turned it around," she corrected. "I couldn't have done this without people like you, Chris." Chris's expression grew serious, his admiration for her clear. "You're an amazing leader, Olivia. I'm just glad I got to be part of it." They shared a quiet moment. the weight of everything they had accomplished together settling between them. Olivia felt a deep sense of fulfillment, not just because the company was thriving, but because she had done it in a way that felt true to who she was. She had stayed true to her values, to the lessons she had learned throughout her life. Leadership wasn't about power or titles. It was about people. As the sun began to set outside the large glass windows of her office, casting a warm glow over the city, Olivia sat at her desk and opened the first file. She had already started thinking about the future. New projects, new goals, new ways to push Didn Tech to even greater heights. The work was never truly finished, but that was part of the thrill. She glanced at the nameplate on her desk, the one that now read Olivia Caldwell, CEO. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile before turning back to the reports. She had earned her place here, not just because of her success, but because of the way she had achieved it. The road ahead was full of possibilities, and Olivia was ready for whatever came next. 1 year later, Didn Tech was on the cover of every major business magazine. Industry leaders hailed the company as a model for sustainable growth and innovative leadership. Under Olivia's guidance, Didn Tech had launched groundbreaking products, expanded its workforce, and become known as one of the best places to work in the tech industry. But for Olivia, the greatest accomplishment wasn't the financial success or the accolades. It was the culture she had built, the sense of community, respect, and purpose that now defined Didn Tech. On the anniversary of her takeover, the company held an employee appreciation event where Olivia was asked to give a speech. As she stood on the stage, looking out at the crowd of faces, familiar, new, she felt a surge of pride. "This company's success isn't about one person," she began, her voice clear and strong. "It's about all of us. Every single one of you has contributed to what we've built here. And as we move forward, we're going to continue to grow, innovate, and achieve things we never thought possible. But we'll do it together." The crowd erupted in applause, and Olivia smiled. This was the company she had always dreamed of, building a place where everyone, no matter their role, felt valued and respected. As the applause died down, Olivia stepped back from the podium, feeling a deep sense of peace. The journey had been long, full of challenges and setbacks, but in the end, it had been worth it. She had proven to herself and to the world that true leadership wasn't about power. It was about making a difference in the lives of others, and that was the legacy she would leave behind. Subscribe so you don't miss more incredible stories of strength, perseverance, and justice. Hit the bell to stay updated, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. What would you do if you were in Olivia's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.